What we know is BA.5 is highly immune evasive, meaning you could have been infected 3 months ago, and we're seeing a lot of people who got infected recently getting now reinfected. People who got a booster or a vaccine shot last year are getting breakthrough infections. So the key message from this right now is if you've not gotten a shot in 2022, especially if you're over 50, you got to go out and get one because that's the best way to protect yourself.
That was White House COVID response coordinator Dr. Ashish Jha, who is continuing to beat that drum that people should keep up to date on their vaccinations and also continue to mask up. The latest variant of COVID, BA.5, which is highly transmissible, is causing a summer surge around the nation with cases, hospitalizations, and deaths all up over the last 2 weeks. Joining us now, Dr. Abrar Karan, one of our favorite guests to talk about this story. So, well, not our favorite story, but our favorite guest to break this all down. So tell us a little bit more about BA.5. We've talked about this before. I feel like I have already been on this sort of BA.5 surge front for like 8 weeks now. But help us understand how this new variant is different from the ones we've seen before.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. So the key message for everyone to remember is that, even if you've been infected before with a different variant, what we're seeing is that these variants are mutating so quickly. They're so adept at overcoming the immune response from our body, from previous vaccination, from even previous infection, that people are getting reinfected again, even when they just had infection a few weeks or months ago. Now, there's some preliminary data saying that if you have gotten infected with an Omicron variant previously, that is protective against BA.4 and 5, but that data is yet to fully be published. And if you've been infected and been vaccinated with 3 doses, we know that that does provide better protection than if you have not gotten your booster. So there's a lot of moving parts here, but I agree with what Dr. Jha said, which is that if you have not gotten your booster, which is a lot of this country, surprisingly, even at this point, that should be a priority. Even though we don't have, the bivalent boosters that include Omicron yet, I would still get the wild type booster from the earlier strain.
So one of the things about that, though, is that I feel like there's a difference between pushing vaccinations, which is what the White House is doing, and what you have been beating the drum about, which is mitigation, trying to prevent the number of cases, not just preventing the severity of those cases. Can you talk about why that is such an issue in this particular moment? Because everything is back. I've been invited to an event every day this week. And I'm like, I'm not really sure why people are having super spreader events. Those are optional. But masks are not present anywhere, and ventilation, as you've always said, is not on the list of things people are doing right now.
No, exactly. This is actually such an important point because, the reason that we're now pushing vaccinations as a priority is because we're starting to see hospitalizations rise and deaths rising. And so now urgently we're saying, please get your booster shot. And the reason that that's important is because we're now hitting an even more serious threshold, where before the problem was that we were also seeing that there was a lot of infections. Infections allow the virus to keep mutating, and that is going to continue to be a problem. I think what this signifies is that we're getting into an even worse place than we were before, where now we're concerned that hospitalizations and deaths are starting to go up. And it's really awful that we're in this position again. And you and I have talked so many times. We've kept trying to push this message that, while hospitalizations and deaths were relatively low, although still too high, could we be doing something to reduce infections and reduce the spread of the virus? It spreads through the air in the same way that it has before. Unfortunately, little to nothing was done. Mitigation measures were dropped. Ventilation, there's a sort of token messages saying improve ventilation without getting into any of the specifics. Myself and my colleagues have been pushing, 6 or more air changes per hour, trying to get low cost box filter fans into low income communities. There are things that need to be done, and those things are not being done. And now we're back to square one in some ways, where hospitalizations and deaths are going up again, and booster rates are so low. And we're talking about booster based on the old strain of COVID, from even a couple of years ago, when now what we really need is updated vaccines. But are people going to take them? Is there going to be uptake of these? We don't know. Probably when we see hospitalization, deaths go up even more, but it's too late at that point. We don't want to get there.
So how are people supposed to navigate the summer going into the fall? We already know the White House is predicting, a really tough fall and winter, but we're already in this surge. So people are out here, they're trying to live their summer, they're traveling, they're gathering. What is your guidance or any recommendations you have for people planning these events, people trying to take their summer vacations? I mean, how are they supposed to go about navigating a world in which there's a highly contagious variant and no mitigation?
I mean, this is a tough question. I agree with what Dr. Jha said on the vaccination piece for boosting. Like, if you're not boosted, get boosted. If you've been boosted with one dose, but you're elderly, or you have comorbidities and it's been a few months, get boosted with your second dose, because we know that these variants are very good at infecting you again. And I know people that are getting infected even now who are young and healthy, but they're having serious symptoms, shortness of breath, high fevers, not feeling well, not sure if they should go get evaluated in the emergency room or not. Not everybody has a pulse oximeter to check their oxygen. And remember, there's a lot of people that have comorbidities in the US. So one, I would say, do not take this lightly. Two, I would say that if you've had a recent infection, you've had 3 doses, and you're young and healthy, that does provide some level of protection. Like, we've seen data that hybrid immunity is strong, but don't be surprised if you get infected again if you're in high-risk situations. High-risk situations remain the same because spread is happening in the same ways through the air, indoor, big crowding. That is going to be how you get infected. A lot of places still do use daily rapid testing. There are businesses and companies that do it. You can do that too for your event. Rapid tests are easily accessible. You can order them from the White House. You can test before you have a big event or ask that others test before they come in. It takes 15 minutes or less to get the result back. That's a safe way to have a big event, is everyone test right before it. Your risk is pretty low there. But if we don't use those basic mitigation measures, then yeah, over time, you're going to get infected again and again and again. We don't know what this means. You and I have tried to push this message out. What does it mean? What is the risk of this on long COVID, on other effects on your organs, et cetera, et cetera? But I think that people are so exhausted, so fatigued, and just trying to move on and hope everything just works itself out. That's not how infections work.
Right. And I think that, you might be exhausted about COVID, but you really don't want a lifelong chronic illness that is fatigue and exhaustion as a result of long COVID because you didn't take it seriously enough now. Dr. Abarkaran, I really appreciate you being here as always. It's always really great to have you and to talk through all of this with you. Please stay safe. Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.